The Kralix had never encountered a species quite like humans. For 3 solar cycles, the war had raged across the Outer Rim territories, with neither side gaining significant ground. The Kralix were master strategists, their chitinous bodies designed for warfare over millennia of evolution. They stood 8 feet tall, with 4 arms capable of wielding multiple weapons simultaneously, and their natural armor could deflect most conventional projectiles. Commander Jathik surveyed the battlefield from his command ship, his mandibles clicking in satisfaction. The latest weapon had proven devastatingly effective. The humans called it the Thornback Leviathan, though the Kralix knew it simply as their most prized biological asset. These creatures, native to the toxic swamps of Kralix Prime, secreted a neurotoxin so potent that a single drop could paralyze a creature 10 times its size. The Kralix had weaponized them, breeding larger specimens and deploying them on contested worlds. On the surface of Targon III, the human colony struggled. Captain Maria Santos watched through her tactical visor as another squad went silent. The Leviathans were nightmare creatures, resembling massive centipedes with scales that shimmered purple and black. They moved with terrifying speed through the jungle terrain, and wherever they went, human soldiers fell. The toxin worked within seconds, shutting down nervous systems and leaving victims conscious but completely paralyzed as their respiratory systems slowly failed. Maria had lost 30 soldiers in 2 days. The medical teams were overwhelmed, desperately trying to synthesize an antidote, but the toxin's complexity defied their efforts. Each molecule seemed to shift and adapt, rendering previous attempts useless. The brass back on Earth were considering evacuation, which would mean abandoning the colony and its 3 million civilians to Kralix occupation. She stood in the command tent, staring at the holographic casualty reports when Private First Class Tommy Chen burst through the entrance. His uniform was torn, covered in mud and the distinctive purple residue that marked Leviathan territory. But he was alive, grinning like a madman, and carrying something wrapped in his jacket. "Captain, you need to see this," Tommy said, carefully unwrapping his bundle on the strategy table. Inside lay a section of Leviathan flesh, maybe 2 pounds worth, already dressed and cleaned. Maria's stomach turned. "Private, what in God's name—" "I ate it, ma'am," Tommy interrupted, his words tumbling out in excitement. "I was pinned down, out of rations for 3 days, and there was this dead Leviathan that Martinez's squad had taken down. I was starving, delirious maybe, and I cooked it over a small fire and ate it." The tent fell silent. Everyone knew that even touching Leviathan remains without proper hazmat protection was considered suicidal. The toxin remained active in the tissues for days after death. Maria found her voice. "You should be dead, Private. That's the thing, ma'am." "I should be. But not only am I alive, something changed. Watch this." Tommy pulled out his combat knife and made a small cut on his forearm. Before Maria could stop him, he reached into a sealed container on the medical officer's belt and dabbed a swab of Leviathan toxin directly into the wound. The medical officer, Lieutenant Park, lunged forward, but Tommy held up his hand. "Wait, just watch." 30 seconds passed. Then a minute. Tommy flexed his arm, showing full mobility. His pupils were normal, his breathing steady. By all scientific understanding, he should have been convulsing on the floor. "Immunity," Lieutenant Park whispered, pulling out her scanner and running it over Tommy's arm. "Complete immunity. The toxin is present in his bloodstream, but it's being neutralized. His antibodies are attacking it like it's a common virus." Maria's mind raced. "The consumption. You built immunity by consuming the source." "It gets better, ma'am," Tommy said, practically vibrating with energy. "I feel stronger, faster. My last combat assessment showed reaction times improved by 40%. It's like the toxin changed something in me, but in a good way." The implications crashed over Maria like a tidal wave. Humans had always been known throughout the galaxy for their unusual biology, their ability to adapt and survive in conditions that killed other species. They were omnivores who could digest almost anything, with immune systems that treated alien proteins as puzzles to solve rather than automatic death sentences. But this was unprecedented. "Get me high command," Maria ordered, her voice sharp with urgency. "And Private Chen, you're not leaving this tent until we've taken every biological sample possible. Lieutenant Park, I want a full workup, and I want it yesterday." As the communication officers scrambled to establish a secure channel to Earth, Maria looked at the piece of Leviathan flesh on her table. Throughout human history, they had survived by being willing to eat what others wouldn't, to adapt where others couldn't. They had eaten poisonous pufferfish, toxic cassava, and countless other dangerous foods, learning through trial, error, and death how to make them safe. Now, stranded on an alien world and facing extinction from a weaponized predator, humanity was about to do what it did best. They were going to turn their greatest threat into their greatest advantage. They were going to put the Leviathan on the menu. Across the battlefield, Commander Jathik had no idea that the war had just fundamentally changed. He had no concept of human culinary adventurousness, no understanding that humans had climbed to the top of their food chain not through natural weapons or armor, but through sheer stubborn willingness to eat absolutely anything that couldn't eat them first. The Kraliks had given humanity a weapon, they just didn't know it yet. The war was about to take a turn that no alien species could have predicted. Humanity was going to eat its way to victory. The emergency transmission reached Earth's military command within hours, marked with the highest priority encryption. Admiral Chenjiao sat in the situation room, surrounded by generals, scientists, and politicians, all staring at the holographic image of Captain Santos transmitted from Targon III. Next to her stood Private Tommy Chen, the Admiral's nephew, looking remarkably healthy for someone who should have been a casualty statistic. "Run that by me again, Captain," Admiral Zhao said, leaning forward in his chair. "Your private ate the alien creature that's been killing our soldiers by the dozens, and now he's immune to its toxin?" Maria nodded, her exhaustion evident even through the light years of distance. "Not just immune, sir, enhanced. His physical performance has increased across all metrics. Dr. Park believes the toxin, when consumed and digested rather than injected directly into the bloodstream, triggers an unprecedented adaptive response in human biology." Dr. Sarah Park stepped into frame, her tablet glowing with data. "Admiral, human digestive systems are essentially biological processing plants. We can break down and neutralize countless toxins that would kill other species outright. Our stomach acid, our enzyme production, our gut bacteria, they're all incredibly aggressive compared to most known alien biology. When Private Chen consumed the Leviathan tissue, his digestive system broke down the toxin into component proteins. His immune system then mapped those proteins and created antibodies. But something else happened too." She pulled up a molecular diagram. "The toxin contains complex amino acid chains that, once broken down properly, act as a catalyst for enhanced neural connectivity and muscle efficiency. In its natural form, it's a deadly weapon. Properly processed through human digestion, it becomes a performance enhancer. Private Chen isn't just immune, he's been upgraded." The room erupted in discussion. General Martinez stood, his voice cutting through the noise. "Are you suggesting we feed our soldiers these monsters? Do you understand the risk? One person surviving doesn't make this safe, which is why we need volunteers," Maria interjected. "We've already got 50 soldiers who want to try." Word spread fast. "They've seen what Tommy can do now. He took on 3 Kraliks warriors in close combat yesterday and won. He moves faster, thinks quicker, and the enemy's best weapon can't touch him." Admiral Zhao held up his hand for silence. His eyes, so similar to his nephew's, were calculating. "Dr. Park, what's your confidence level that this can be replicated safely?" 70%, sir. "Maybe higher. We've identified the preparation method. The tissue must be cooked thoroughly at high temperature to denature the toxin initially, then consumed with specific enzyme supplements that aid breakdown. We've created a protocol. It's not without risk, but compared to our current casualty rates." She let the statement hang. The Admiral looked at the faces around the room. He saw fear, skepticism, but also hope. They were losing this war. The Kraliks were pushing them back system by system. Conventional warfare wasn't working. Sometimes victory required unconventional solutions. "Captain Santos, you have authorization to begin controlled trials. Volunteers only. Full medical monitoring. If this works, we'll expand it. If it doesn't..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. On Targon III, Maria assembled her volunteers in the main hangar. 50 men and women stood before her, ranging from green privates to grizzled sergeants. They knew the risks. They'd all signed the waivers, made their peace with the possibility of a very unpleasant death. But they'd also seen Tommy Chen in action, watched him move through the jungle like something out of a superhero movie, immune to the weapon that had claimed so many of their friends. The preparation area had been set up like a field kitchen, except instead of standard rations, they were cooking Leviathan. The creatures had been hunted specifically for this purpose, their bodies harvested with extreme care. The smell was surprisingly pleasant, somewhere between shellfish and pork, with a faint sweetness that made more than one soldier's mouth water despite the circumstances. Dr. Park supervised every step. The meat was cut into precise portions, cooked at exactly 165 degrees Celsius for 15 minutes, then served with a cocktail of enzymes and probiotics designed to aid digestion. Each volunteer would consume approximately 8 ounces, then be monitored intensively for the next 72 hours. Tommy Chen stood among the volunteers, ready to consume his second dose. "It's not bad, actually," he told the nervous private next to him. "Tastes kind of like crab. Rich, a little gamey. The first bite's the hardest because your brain knows what it is. After that, it's just food." Sergeant Rita Morrison, a 20-year veteran with 3 Purple Hearts, picked up her plate with steady hands. "I've eaten scorpions in survival training, snake in the Australian outback, and whatever the hell that fermented fish thing was in Korea. This is just another Tuesday." Maria watched as, one by one, her soldiers consumed the flesh of their enemy. It felt primal, almost ritualistic. Throughout human history, warriors had consumed the hearts of their enemies, believing it would grant them strength. Usually that was just superstition. Today, it might actually be true. The first 12 hours were tense. Some soldiers experienced nausea, fever, muscle aches, standard immune response to foreign proteins. But none showed signs of toxin poisoning. By hour 24, the changes began. Enhanced reflexes, improved visual acuity, increased stamina. Dr. Park's scans showed the same antibody production in all subjects, the same neural enhancement patterns. By hour 48, Maria had 50 super soldiers, and the Kraliks had no idea what was coming for them. Private Chen and Sergeant Morrison stood together on the observation deck, looking out at the jungle where leviathans prowled. "You know what the craziest part is?" Morrison said, flexing her hands and marveling at how fast they moved. "We're not just immune to their weapon. We're better because of it. They tried to poison us, and we turned their poison into power," Tommy grinned. "That's humanity for you. Give us something that should kill us, and we'll figure out how to eat it, drink it, or weaponize it. Usually all 3. In the Kraliks command ship, Jothik received reports of unusual human activity. Increased hunting parties targeting leviathans specifically. He dismissed it as desperation, perhaps trying to eliminate the creatures before they could be deployed. He had no frame of reference for what humans were actually doing. In Kraliks culture, consuming another sentient species' biological weapons would be unthinkable, disgusting, fundamentally wrong. But humans weren't Kraliks. Humans were the species that had survived ice ages and plagues, that had thrived in every environment their planet offered, from frozen tundra to scorching desert. They were the species that had looked at wolves and said, pets, at aurochs and said, food, at every challenge nature threw at them and responded with tools, fire, and an unshakable determination to not just survive, but dominate. The war was about to learn what that really meant. 3 weeks after the first successful trial, the human counteroffensive began. Captain Santos stood with her enhanced soldiers at the edge of what had been designated as Kraliks territory, a vast stretch of jungle that had claimed hundreds of human lives. Today, they were taking it back. The 50 volunteers had become 500, then 5,000. Every human military installation on Targon III had established preparation facilities. The protocol had been refined, the success rate climbing to 96%. Those who didn't successfully adapt suffered nothing worse than a bad case of food poisoning and were returned to regular duty. But those who did adapt became something unprecedented in human military history. Lieutenant Marcus Webb crouched beside Maria, his enhanced vision picking out Kraliks' positions through the dense foliage that would have been invisible to him a month ago. 12 hostiles, 200 meters northeast. They've got a Leviathan with them, probably planning to deploy it toward New Shanghai settlement. Maria smiled grimly. Then let's introduce them to the new human military doctrine. All units advance. Remember your training. They're expecting us to fear the Leviathans. Show them why that was a mistake. The attack came at dawn. The Kraliks had established a forward operating base, a cluster of bioorganic structures that pulsed with their distinctive purple bioluminescence. Commander Jothik was present, overseeing the deployment of 3 Leviathans that would be released toward the human settlements. The attacks had been devastatingly effective, and he anticipated the humans would retreat within days. The first indication something was wrong came when his perimeter guards went silent. Not the screaming, the weapons fire, the chaos of combat, just silence, sudden and complete. Jothik's mandibles clicked in confusion as he tried to raise them on communications. Nothing. Then the humans emerged from the jungle, and they were moving wrong. Too fast, too fluid, with a grace and speed that shouldn't have been possible for their species. Private Chen led the first wave, practically flying through the underbrush. A Kralix warrior raised its weapon, forearms moving in perfect coordination, but Tommy was faster. He closed the distance in seconds, his combat knife finding the weak points in Kralix armor with surgical precision. Sergeant Morrison flanked right, leading her squad through a defensive position that should have been impenetrable. The Kralix fired their plasma weapons, but the humans seemed to anticipate every shot, dodging with reflexes that bordered on precognitive. The enhanced neural connectivity wasn't just making them faster, it was making them smarter, their tactical processing elevated to a new level. "Release the Leviathans," Jothik commanded, desperation creeping into his voice. The containment fields dropped, and 3 massive creatures surged toward the human forces. Each one was 15 feet long, their scales glistening with toxin, mandibles clicking eagerly. They had never failed before. They were death incarnate. The humans didn't retreat. They didn't even slow down. Lieutenant Webb's squad actually changed direction, moving toward the Leviathans instead of away. The creatures struck with blinding speed, their neurotoxin-laced fangs punching through combat armor, directly into flesh. The Kralix waited for the humans to fall, to seize and convulse as the toxin did its work. Instead, Webb ripped the Leviathan's mandibles apart with his bare hands. The toxin coursed through his system and did nothing. He'd consumed Leviathan flesh 6 times now, and his immunity was absolute. Around him, his squad engaged the other 2 creatures in close combat, showing no fear of the biological weapons that had defined this war. Within minutes, all 3 Leviathans were dead, and the humans were already field dressing them. Jothik watched in horror through his command center's screens as human soldiers actually consumed raw Leviathan flesh right there on the battlefield, like some kind of barbaric victory ritual. "What are they?" one of his officers whispered, all forearms trembling. "What kind of species eats its own predators?" Jothik had no answer. In Kralix culture, in most galactic cultures, the idea of consuming something that killed your own kind was beyond taboo. It was incomprehensible. Food was cultivated, processed, sanitized. The thought of eating a predator, especially one designed as a weapon, violated every instinct they possessed. But humans were different. Humans had evolved as persistence hunters, tracking prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. They had developed the ability to sweat, to throw with accuracy, to run marathons. They had conquered their planet not through strength or natural weapons, but through sheer stubborn refusal to quit and an ability to adapt to anything. Their digestive systems were chemical warfare plants, capable of processing nearly anything organic. Their immune systems were aggressive and creative, treating every foreign protein as a challenge rather than a death sentence. The Kralix had handed humanity the key to defeating them, and humanity had responded by eating it. The base fell within 2 hours. Maria's forces swept through with minimal casualties, their enhanced abilities making them more than a match for Kralix warriors in close combat. The few prisoners they took stared at them with something approaching religious terror, as if humans weren't soldiers but demons wearing human skin. In the aftermath, Maria walked through the captured base with Dr. Park, who was already cataloging the Kralix biological research data. "They've been breeding Leviathans for purity," Park said, scrolling through alien text that the translation software rendered in real time, trying to make the toxin even more potent. "They have embryos here, genetic samples, entire breeding programs. Can we use any of it?" Maria asked. Park's eyes lit up. "All of it. Captain, they've essentially handed us a complete biological enhancement program. With these genetic samples, we can optimize the Leviathan tissue for human consumption. Maybe even synthesize the beneficial compounds without needing to hunt the creatures. We could create a serum, make the enhancement available to every human soldier in the fleet." The implications were staggering. Within months, every human military member could potentially have enhanced reflexes, improved cognitive function, and complete immunity to the Kralix's primary weapon. The balance of power wouldn't just shift, it would shatter entirely. Tommy Chen approached, carrying his helmet under one arm. His squad had pushed the furthest, clearing 3 Kralix positions with 0 casualties. Captain, we found their communication hub. The Kralix have been broadcasting reports back to their homeworld. They're terrified. One of their messages literally translates to, the humans are eating the Leviathans and becoming stronger. Their high command thinks the field officers are losing their minds. Maria felt a fierce satisfaction burn through her. The Kralix had started this war, confident in their superiority, in their biological weapons that made them unstoppable. They had underestimated humanity's greatest strength, their ability to take the worst the universe could throw at them and somehow turn it into an advantage. Send a message to all Kralix forces in the system, Maria ordered. Tell them that humanity thanks them for the enhancement serum. Tell them that every Leviathan they deploy is just going to make us stronger. And tell them that we're done defending. Starting now, we're coming for them. As the message broadcast across all Kralix channels, Maria looked at her enhanced soldiers, at these warriors who had literally eaten their way to victory, and smiled. The Kralix had wanted to break humanity with their biological weapons. Instead, they had forged humanity into something stronger, faster, and absolutely terrifying. They had learned the hardest lesson in the galaxy. Never give humans something poisonous and expect them not to figure out how to eat it. The news of what happened on Targon 3 spread through the human fleet like wildfire, and through Kralix space like a plague. Within weeks, every human military vessel had received shipments of processed Leviathan tissue, carefully preserved and prepared according to Dr. Park's refined protocols. The transformation of Earth's military forces had begun in earnest. Admiral Zhao stood on the bridge of the ESS Indomitable, humanity's largest carrier, watching as his crew underwent the enhancement process. He had taken the treatment himself 3 days prior, and the difference was remarkable. At 62 years old, he felt better than he had at 30. His chronic back pain had vanished, his vision had sharpened to the point where he no longer needed his reading glasses, and his mind felt clearer, processing tactical data with a speed that astonished him. Admiral, incoming transmission from Kralix High Command, his communications officer announced. They're requesting a parley. Zhao raised an eyebrow. After 3 years of radio silence, now they want to talk? Put them through. The holographic display shimmered, revealing Supreme Commander Vothkar, the highest-ranking Kralix military officer. His chitinous face was harder to read than a human's, but Zhao had learned enough about Kralix body language to recognize distress in the way his mandibles twitched and his antennae lay flat against his head. Admiral Zhao, Vothkar began, his voice translated by the real-time linguistic software. We must discuss the situation developing in the Outer Rim. Your forces have begun consuming Leviathan tissue. This is a violation of galactic biological warfare conventions. Zhao almost laughed. You deployed a biological weapon designed to kill my soldiers, and now you're upset that we found a countermeasure? That's rich, Supreme Commander. Perhaps you should have read the fine print about humanity before you decided to use toxins against us. You don't understand. Vothkar's voice carried an edge of something that might have been panic. The Leviathan is a sacred creature to the Kralix. It is our symbol of natural perfection, our spiritual guide. Consuming its flesh is not merely a tactical decision, it is a profound blasphemy. You are eating our gods. Zhao processed this information, recalibrating his understanding of the situation. The Leviathan wasn't just a weapon to the Kralix, it was religiously significant. No wonder they seemed so disturbed. Supreme Commander, humanity has a saying, don't weaponize what you can't afford to lose. You turned your sacred creature into a tool of war. We responded in kind. There must be a ceasefire, Vothkar insisted. We are prepared to negotiate terms to withdraw from contested systems. But you must cease the consumption of Leviathan tissue immediately. The psychological effect on our people has been devastating. Our soldiers refuse to deploy to worlds where humans have been seen eating the sacred flesh. Morale has collapsed. Some are calling it the end times. Zhao leaned back in his command chair, considering. This was bigger than simple military advantage. They had struck at the heart of Kralix culture, shattered something fundamental in their enemy's worldview. The humans hadn't just defeated a weapon, they had committed what the Kralix perceived as deicide, and done so casually, as if it were simply another meal. I'll take your proposal to Earth Command, Zhao said finally. But understand this, Supreme Commander. Humanity didn't start this war. You invaded our colonies, killed our civilians, and deployed biological weapons against us. We adapted. We survived. We overcame. That's what we do. If you want peace, it will be on our terms, not yours." The transmission ended. Zhao sat in silence for a moment, then opened a secure channel to Captain Santos on Targon III. "Captain, I need your assessment. If we push forward with full military operations, enhanced forces across all fronts, what's our timeline to complete victory?" Maria's image appeared, her expression confident. "With current enhancement rates, we'll have 50,000 enhanced soldiers within a month, 200,000 within 3. The Kralix can't match us in ground combat anymore. Their forces are demoralized, their primary weapon is useless, and every engagement just gives us more enhancement material. 6 months, maybe less, and we could push them back to their core systems. A year, and we could occupy Kralix Prime itself. And what's the cost? Minimal compared to previous projections. Enhanced soldiers have a 98% survival rate in combat. We're not just winning, Admiral. We're dominating," Zhao nodded slowly. "Prepare your forces for a major offensive. I want pressure on every Kralix position in the Outer Rim. But Captain, I also want you to prepare for another possibility. The Kralix want peace. They're broken, culturally and militarily. We might be looking at an unconditional surrender situation." On Kralix Prime, the situation was indeed dire. Supreme Commander Vothkar addressed the Convergence, the ruling body of Kralix civilization, in an emergency session. The chamber was filled with the Empire's most powerful leaders, military commanders, scientists, and religious authorities. The atmosphere was tense, heavy with the weight of impending catastrophe. "The humans have committed unthinkable acts," High Priest Zalthor spoke, his ancient carapace dulled with age. "They consume the flesh of the Leviathan, the sacred guardian. They mock our most holy traditions. This is not mere war, it is spiritual annihilation." "They didn't know," Vothkar said wearily. "How could they? They're aliens with completely different cultural values. To them, it's simply tactical adaptation. They saw a creature killing them, they found a way to neutralize it, and they utilized every advantage they could extract from the situation. It's logical from their perspective." "Then their perspective is that of demons," another priest interjected. "No civilized species would do such a thing. The reports from the front are nightmare fuel. Human soldiers hunting leviathans, preparing them like common food, consuming their flesh and growing stronger from it. They laugh as they do it. They invite our warriors to watch. Some have even developed preferences for how the meat is prepared. A military commander, General Kreshitar, stood. "Theological concerns aside, we cannot win this war." "Not anymore. The humans number in the billions across dozens of worlds. They reproduce rapidly, adapt quickly, and now they possess physical capabilities that exceed our own. Every Leviathan we deploy becomes food for their soldiers. Every world we try to hold becomes a source of enhancement material for their forces. We are, quite literally, feeding our enemy's strength." "There is another concern," Science Director Malther added, projecting data into the chamber's central display. "We've analyzed human biology extensively. Their capacity for adaptation is unprecedented. They evolved on a death world, a planet teeming with predators, diseases, and environmental extremes. Their immune systems are extraordinarily aggressive. Their digestive systems can process an absurd variety of organic material. They're essentially biological processing machines, capable of extracting advantage from nearly any source." The director zoomed in on molecular diagrams. "The Leviathan toxin triggers enhancement in them because their bodies don't simply resist foreign proteins. They learn from them, incorporate them, weaponize them. This isn't a unique response to Leviathan tissue. Given time and exposure, humans could potentially develop beneficial adaptations to almost any biological agent we deploy. We tried to poison them, and we accidentally created a super soldier serum tailored specifically to their biology." Silence fell over the chamber. The implications were clear. The Kralix hadn't just lost a battle or even a war. They had fundamentally miscalculated what kind of species they were fighting. Humans weren't like other races that could be intimidated by biological warfare. They were the species that had thrived by being unkillable, unadaptable, and absolutely refusing to accept defeat. "We sue for peace," Vothkar said finally. "Immediately. We offer reparations, territorial concessions, whatever it takes. Because the alternative is watching our sacred creatures be hunted to extinction and fed to human soldiers while they march across our worlds. We cannot win this fight. We can only choose how badly we lose. The vote was unanimous. 3 years of war ended not with a dramatic battle or heroic last stand, but with a broken empire realizing they had picked a fight with the wrong species. They had tried to kill humanity with poison, never realizing that humanity's superpower was turning poison into power, threat into opportunity, and enemies into dinner. The peace negotiations took place on neutral ground, a diplomatic station maintained by the Galactic Council in the Threshold system. It was the first time representatives from humanity and the Kralix had met face-to-face without weapons between them. The contrast was striking and, to many observers, deeply unsettling. Ambassador Catherine Morrison, sister to Sergeant Rita Morrison, and a career diplomat with 30 years of experience, led the human delegation. She had also undergone the enhancement process, though she wore it less obviously than the soldiers. Still, the Kralix delegation noticed how she moved. How her eyes tracked every detail of the room with predatory precision. How she seemed to process information with uncanny speed. Across the negotiation table sat Supreme Commander Voth Kar and High Priest Zalthor, along with a dozen other Kralix officials. They looked diminished somehow, their proud bearing replaced by something resembling shell shock. Several Galactic Council observers were also present, including representatives from the Quill Collective, the Methane Breathers, and the Silicon Confederacy. They had come to witness what everyone knew would be a historic moment. Before we begin formal negotiations, Zalthor spoke, his translator rendering his chittering speech into standard English. I must ask, on behalf of my people, that you understand what you have done. The Leviathan is sacred to us. For 10,000 years it has been the symbol of our strength, our connection to our homeworld, our spiritual guide. When your soldiers consume its flesh, when they laugh and share recipes, when they casually slaughter creatures that we revere as semi-divine, you wound us in ways that transcend military defeat. Catherine listened carefully, her enhanced cognitive abilities allowing her to parse not just the words, but the emotional subtext, the body language, the pheromone signals that her upgraded senses could now detect. She saw genuine anguish in the priest's posture, real trauma in how the Kralix delegation held themselves. They weren't just defeated enemies. They were a civilization in spiritual crisis. I understand, Catherine said carefully, and I want to be clear about something. Humanity did not know the cultural significance of the Leviathan. We saw only a weapon being used to kill our people. When Private Chen first consumed Leviathan flesh, it was an act of survival, not sacrilege. He was starving, surrounded by enemies, with only a dead creature for sustenance. That he survived and thrived was pure biology, not strategy. Yet you weaponized this knowledge, Vothkar said. You created protocols, mass-produced enhancement serums, turned our sacred creatures into military rations. Yes, Catherine admitted. Because we were at war and we were losing. Your forces had killed thousands of our people. The Leviathan toxin was designed specifically to target human neural chemistry. Your scientists tailored it to be maximally lethal to us. What were we supposed to do? Die respectfully? A Quill Collective observer, Ambassador Preen, raised a tentacle. If I may interject, this situation highlights a fundamental misunderstanding between species. The Kralix approach warfare with certain cultural assumptions that there are weapons too sacred to counter, tactics too dishonorable to employ. Humanity clearly operates under different assumptions. Humanity operates under the assumption that survival comes first, Catherine said. We evolved on a planet that spent millions of years trying to kill us. We survived ice ages, supervolcanoes, plague, predators, and our own worst impulses. We learned to eat everything, use everything, waste nothing. When faced with a threat, we adapt. Always. It's not cultural, it's biological. It's who we are at the most fundamental level. She pulled up a holographic display, showing Earth's evolutionary history. We ate poisonous plants and learned to process the toxins. We consumed venomous creatures and developed immunity to their venom. We drank alcohol and caffeine, both technically toxic to most species, and integrated them into our cultures. Our entire civilization is built on the principle of turning threats into resources. The Leviathan was just the latest example. This is precisely what terrifies the Kralix, a Silicon Confederacy representative spoke, their crystalline voice chiming. You are describing a species with no apparent limits to adaptation. If the Leviathan toxin makes you stronger, what else might? What other weapons might you turn into advantages? Catherine met the Silicon being's multifaceted gaze. Almost anything, given time and necessity. But here's what you need to understand. We don't want to be at war. We didn't start this conflict. We were colonizing uninhabited worlds, minding our own business when the Kraliks invaded. Every adaptation we've made has been defensive, reactive. Give us peace and we'll go back to building our civilization. Keep threatening us, and we'll keep adapting. Vothkar's mandibles clicked in what the translator rendered as resigned acceptance. We understand. The Convergence has authorized me to offer complete withdrawal from all contested systems, full reparations for damages inflicted on human colonies, and a non-aggression pact lasting no less than 100 standard years. In exchange for? Catherine asked. Cessation of Leviathan consumption and a guarantee that humanity will not expand into core Kraliks territories. Catherine considered this, running probability matrices in her enhanced mind. The offer was generous, arguably too generous. The Kraliks were more broken than they were letting on. She could push for more, probably get it. But good diplomacy wasn't just about winning, it was about building a sustainable peace. Unacceptable, she said, and watched the Kraliks delegation stiffen in alarm. The non-aggression pact needs to be reciprocal and permanent, not limited to a century. We're not interested in temporary peace. As for Leviathan consumption, we're willing to phase it out over 5 years as we transition to synthetic alternatives. Dr. Park has successfully synthesized the beneficial compounds. We don't need to hunt Leviathans anymore. But we won't abandon the enhancement program. It saved too many human lives. And our core territories? Vothkar asked. We have no interest in them. Humanity prefers to colonize uninhabited worlds. We like room to grow, but we'll need guaranteed trade access and freedom of navigation through Kralik space. We're neighbors now, whether we like it or not. We need to figure out how to coexist. The negotiations continued for 3 days. The Galactic Council observers watched with fascination as humanity, the newcomer species, dictated terms to the Kralix Empire, one of the galaxy's established powers. But what struck them most wasn't the human victory. It was how reasonable the terms were. Catherine could have demanded occupation, war crime tribunals, territorial seizure. Instead, she focused on sustainable coexistence. On the final day, as they prepared to sign the treaty, High Priest Zalthor approached Catherine privately. I have a question, Ambassador, that I must ask for my own understanding. When your soldier first ate the Leviathan, when he survived and grew stronger, did any of your people see this as wrong? Did anyone suggest that perhaps there are things too sacred, too dangerous, too fundamentally other to consume? Catherine thought about this carefully. Some did, yes. There were debates about the ethics, the risks, the unknown long-term consequences. But ultimately, the decision was driven by necessity and curiosity, two of humanity's strongest traits. We needed a solution to the toxin problem, and we found one. As for things being too sacred to use, humans have different views on that. We're a deeply practical species. We believe that survival isn't sacred because it follows rules. Survival is sacred because it allows us to keep existing, keep learning, keep growing. You are a terrifying species, Zalthor said quietly. Not because you are violent or cruel, but because you are inexhaustible. You adapt to anything. You learn from everything. You take the universe's worst and somehow make it work for you. The Leviathan was supposed to be our ultimate weapon, and you turned it into food. What can possibly stop a species like that? Catherine smiled gently. Ourselves, mostly. Humans are dangerous to everyone, including other humans. But we're learning. We've had world wars, near extinctions, catastrophes of our own making. We've learned that cooperation works better than conquest, that diversity makes us stronger, that different doesn't mean enemy. It's why we're here negotiating instead of pushing for total victory. We could probably defeat you completely, occupy your worlds, impose our will. But what would that accomplish? We'd just create another enemy, waste resources, and damage ourselves in the process. She extended her hand, a human gesture of agreement. We're offering you something better than victory or defeat. We're offering you partnership. Learn from us, teach us. Help us understand the galaxy we've joined. And maybe someday you'll see our ability to adapt not as a threat, but as a bridge. Because if humans can eat your sacred creatures and somehow make that work out for everyone, imagine what we can do when we're actually trying to cooperate. Zalthor looked at her hand for a long moment, then carefully reached out with one clawed appendage. The handshake was awkward, their anatomies so different, but the meaning was clear. The war was over. Ended not by violence, but by the realization that humanity was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Dangerous. Yes, but also pragmatic, adaptable, and surprisingly willing to build instead of destroy when given the chance. 6 months after the peace treaty, the galaxy was still adjusting to the new reality. The Kralix had withdrawn to their core systems, nursing their wounded pride and grappling with a theological crisis that would reshape their civilization for generations. Humanity, meanwhile, had become something of a galactic sensation, not for their military prowess, though that was considerable, but for the sheer audacity of their survival strategy. Captain Maria Santos stood in what had once been a military preparation facility on Targon III, but was now something entirely different. The sign above the entrance read, "The Leviathan Grill, where yesterday's threat is today's treat." She shook her head in amused disbelief. Leave it to humans to turn a former bioweapon preparation site into a restaurant. The proprietor, none other than Private Tommy Chen, had retired from active military service to pursue what he called culinary diplomacy. His restaurant had become a surprising success, attracting curious visitors from across the galaxy who wanted to taste the legendary creature that had ended the war. Tommy had refined his cooking techniques, creating dishes that ranged from simple grilled Leviathan steaks to complex fusion cuisines that blended human and alien culinary traditions. "Captain Santos," Tommy called out, waving from behind the kitchen. "Your regular table is ready. I've got something special today. Leviathan carpaccio with a reduction sauce made from Quill Collective spices. It's amazing." Maria sat down, marveling at how strange life had become. Around her, the restaurant was packed with an unlikely mix of clientele. Enhanced human soldiers sat alongside Kralix civilians who had made the brave journey to human space, their curiosity overcoming their cultural horror. Silicon Confederacy members observed the organic consumption process with scientific fascination. Even a few methane breathers sat in their specialized atmosphere bubbles, unable to eat the food but studying the social dynamics. At a nearby table, she noticed Dr. Sarah Park dining with a group of Kralix scientists. The conversation was animated, with Park gesturing enthusiastically at holographic molecular diagrams while the Kralix listened with obvious interest despite their discomfort. "Mind if I join you?" Maria asked, approaching their table. Park looked up, smiling. "Captain." "Perfect timing. We're discussing the synthetic enhancement serum. The Kralix have offered to help refine it. Turns out their knowledge of Leviathan biology is far more advanced than ours, and they're willing to share it if it means we can stop hunting wild Leviathans." One of the Kralix scientists, identified by her nameplate as researcher Catherine, spoke carefully. "It is difficult for us. Helping humanity optimize the consumption of our sacred creature violates everything we were taught. But High Priest Zalthor has declared that if the Leviathan sacrifice, even an unwilling one, brings peace and understanding between species, then perhaps it serves a higher purpose than we originally understood." "That's remarkably progressive," Maria observed. "Not everyone agrees," Catherine said. "There are factions on Kralix Prime that see us as traitors, blasphemers. But Supreme Commander Vothkar protects us. He understands that the old ways led to war and defeat. Perhaps new ways can lead somewhere better." Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion near the entrance. Admiral Zhao entered, accompanied by Ambassador Morrison and several Galactic Council representatives. The restaurant fell into a respectful silence as the high-ranking officials made their way through. "Don't let us interrupt," Zhao said, gesturing for everyone to continue eating. "This is actually a working visit. Ambassador Morrison, if you would." Catherine stood, her enhanced voice easily carrying through the space. "Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of all classifications, I'm pleased to announce that the Galactic Council has officially recognized humanity's enhancement program as a legitimate defensive technology. Furthermore, the Council has requested that we share our research with other member species who may wish to develop similar adaptive capabilities." A ripple of surprise went through the crowd. Sharing the enhancement technology meant that humanity's military advantage would disappear as other species adopted it. But Catherine continued, "Humanity has agreed with conditions. Any species that wishes to participate must contribute their own biological research, creating a shared database of adaptive techniques. The goal is to make all Council species more resilient against biological threats, whether natural or artificial." "This is extraordinary," a Silicon Confederacy representative chimed. "Humanity could have maintained their military superiority. Why share it?" Admiral Zhao answered this time. "Because we've learned something important about power. Having the biggest stick doesn't make you safe. It just makes everyone else want to take your stick or build a bigger one. Real security comes from making everyone stronger together. If all council species are more resilient, more adaptable, then biological warfare becomes pointless. Nobody wins, so nobody tries. A Kralik civilian stood up, his voice shaking slightly. I must speak. I am Takrin, a teacher from Kralik's Prime. I came here to understand the humans who ate our gods. I expected monsters. Instead, I find people who laugh and eat and build businesses. I watch them dine alongside my people, sharing food and stories. Private Chen has taught me 17 different human recipes, including 3 ways to prepare Leviathan that he insists I would find palatable, though I cannot bring myself to try. He looked around the restaurant. My people were wrong. We saw humans as demons who desecrated our sacred creatures. But I have learned that humans do not think in terms of sacred and profane. They think in terms of useful and not useful, dangerous and safe, food and not food. It is not malice. It is simply a fundamentally different worldview. They are not demons. They are survivors. And they do what survivors do. Tommy Chen approached the Kralik's teacher, carrying a small plate. Mr. Takrin, I know you can't eat Leviathan. Cultural reasons, I respect that. But I made you something else. It's a traditional human dish called pizza, with vegetables from your homeworld that you said reminded you of your childhood. No sacred creatures, no controversial ingredients. Just food, made by someone who respects your beliefs but wants to share a meal. The Kralik's teacher looked at the offered food, then at Tommy, then at the diverse crowd of humans and aliens sharing space in what should have been impossible circumstances. Slowly, he accepted the plate. Thank you, Private Chen. Perhaps this is how peace actually works. Not through treaties and negotiations, though those are important, but through small moments, through food and conversation, through learning that the other is not so different after all. Maria watched this exchange and felt something shift in her understanding. They had won the war through adaptation and resilience, yes, but they were winning the peace through something else entirely, through humanity's strange ability to turn enemies into neighbors, threats into opportunities, and war zones into gathering places. Dr. Park rejoined Maria, her eyes thoughtful. You know what's interesting? The enhancement process doesn't just make us physically superior. The neural connectivity improvements enhance empathy, too. Enhanced humans are better at reading emotional cues, understanding different perspectives, processing complex social dynamics. We created super soldiers, but we also accidentally created super diplomats. Is that what you are now? Maria teased. A super diplomat? I'm a scientist helping former enemies work together to make everyone better, Park replied. What would you call that? Before Maria could answer, an alarm sounded. Not a military alert, but a news notification. Every device in the restaurant lit up simultaneously with breaking news. The headline made everyone freeze. First contact event. New species detected at the edge of council space. Initial reports indicate hostile intent. Admiral Zhao's face went grim. Captain Santos, Dr. Park, Ambassador Morrison with me. Everyone else, enjoy your meals. This might be nothing. But as they left the restaurant and headed for the military command center, Maria knew it wasn't nothing. The galaxy had just learned that humanity could adapt, could turn threats into advantages, could eat poison and grow stronger. Now they were about to find out what humanity did with those abilities when faced with a new threat. The answer, as it had been throughout human history, was simple. They would survive. They would adapt. They would learn. And if necessary, they would teach the new species the same lesson the Kraliks had learned. Never assume humanity's limits, because they didn't really have any. They just kept pushing forward, turning every obstacle into an opportunity, every enemy into a teacher, and every impossibility into Tuesday. In the restaurant behind them, humans and aliens continued sharing meals, trading stories, and slowly building the kind of peace that couldn't be written in treaties but had to be lived, one shared experience at a time. And somewhere in the kitchen, Tommy Chen was already experimenting with recipes that might work for the new species, whatever they turned out to be, because that was humanity's real superpower, more than adaptation or resilience. It was the stubborn, optimistic, absolutely irrational belief that anyone could become a friend if you just found the right food to share with them, even if that food had, until recently, been actively trying to kill you. The command center aboard the ESS Indomitable hummed with activity as Admiral Zhao reviewed the incoming data. The new species, designated the Vexor Collective, had emerged from a previously unexplored region of space with surprising aggression. 3 Council outposts had gone dark within hours of first contact, and preliminary scans showed Vexor ships equipped with weaponry unlike anything in the galactic database. "They're not responding to any communication attempts," the communications officer reported. "Standard frequencies, mathematical languages, even the universal peace codes, nothing. They just attack on sight." Ambassador Morrison studied the tactical display, her enhanced cognitive abilities processing the information rapidly. "They're not random, though. Look at the pattern. They're specifically targeting biological research stations and agricultural colonies. They want something specific." Dr. Park pulled up comparative scans of the Vexor themselves, captured from long-range reconnaissance. Fascinating. Their biology is almost entirely synthetic, cybernetic organisms with minimal organic components. They've replaced most biological systems with mechanical ones. I'd guess they see purely biological species as primitive or threatening. Or as resources, Admiral Zhao added grimly. The Quill Collective is reporting that one of their captured stations was completely stripped of all organic material before being destroyed. They took everything, plants, animals, even the bacterial cultures from the laboratories. Captain Santos, who had been promoted to tactical coordinator following the Kralix peace, leaned over the display. If they're harvesting biological material, they might be trying to enhance their own capabilities. Or they could be eliminating potential threats before anyone develops something dangerous. "Like we did with the Leviathan," Catherine said quietly. "They might have heard about the war, about how humanity turned a biological weapon into an enhancement. If they see biological life as unpredictable and dangerous, that would explain the aggressive preemptive strikes." A Kralix liaison officer, Commander Reshtor, spoke up from his station. His presence on a human military vessel would have been unthinkable a year ago, but the peace had brought unexpected cooperation. "The Kralix archives contain references to a species that matches this description. Ancient warnings from before the current convergence. They were called the Harvesters, beings who believed that biological life was chaos that needed to be controlled or eliminated. They were driven from our region of space thousands of years ago. We thought them extinct." "Well, they're not extinct anymore," Zhao said, "and they're heading toward populated systems. Current trajectory puts them on course for the methane breather homeworld within 3 weeks. Population, 14 billion. We need to stop them before they get there." Over the next week, a coalition fleet assembled unlike any the galaxy had seen. Human vessels with their enhanced crews formed the tactical core, but they were joined by Kralix ships, Silicon Confederacy crystalline cruisers, and even traditional Quill Collective defense platforms. Former enemies and neutral parties united against a common threat. The strategy session brought together an unprecedented array of species and viewpoints. Aboard the Indomitable, leaders from across Council space debated how to approach the Vexor. "We should try diplomacy first," a Quill representative insisted. "Violence should always be the last resort." "They're not responding to communication," Reshitor countered, "and they've already killed thousands. At some point, refusing to act becomes complicity in their aggression." Tommy Chen, present as a civilian consultant due to his unique experience with biological adaptation, offered an unexpected perspective. "What if they're scared? Think about it. They're mostly machine, we're mostly organic. They've heard stories about humans eating poison and getting stronger. To them, biological life might seem like the real threat, infinitely adaptable, unpredictable, capable of turning anything into an advantage." "That doesn't excuse genocide," someone objected. "No, but it explains it," Dr. Park interjected. "Fear-driven aggression is common across species. They're trying to eliminate a perceived existential threat. The question is, can we prove to them that coexistence is possible?" Admiral Zhao considered this. "We need to demonstrate strength and restraint simultaneously. Show them we can defend ourselves, but that we choose not to destroy when destruction isn't necessary. Captain Santos, prepare the enhanced combat teams for defensive operations only. We'll protect the methane breather homeworld, but we're not going on the offensive unless absolutely necessary." The Vexor fleet arrived at the methane breather homeworld right on schedule. A massive armada of geometric ships that looked more like floating factories than military vessels. They immediately began deploying harvester drones toward the planet's surface, ignoring the Council fleet positioned in orbit. "All ships, defensive formation," Zhao commanded. "Do not fire unless fired upon. Open all communication channels and broadcast continuously. The message went out in every known language and mathematical system. Vexor Collective, we are the Galactic Council. We do not wish conflict. We will defend this world, but we are willing to negotiate. Please respond. For 30 tense seconds, nothing happened. Then the Vexor ships opened fire, not with conventional weapons, but with something far more disturbing. Biological dissolution beams that broke down organic matter at the molecular level. Several Quill vessels simply came apart, their organic hulls dissolving into component atoms. Return fire, defensive targets only, Zhao ordered. Aim for weapon systems and propulsion. Avoid destroying any vessel completely if possible. The battle was unlike anything in recorded history. The enhanced human crews moved with supernatural coordination, their improved reflexes allowing them to pilot through the devastating Vexor firepower. Kralix vessels, their armor naturally resistant to biological weapons, absorbed hits that would have destroyed other ships and kept fighting. The Silicon Confederacy ships proved immune to the dissolution beams entirely, their crystalline structure unaffected by weapons designed for carbon-based life. But it was the methane breathers themselves who turned the tide in an unexpected way. Their planetary defense grid activated, not with weapons but with something far more creative. Massive projection screens that displayed a simple message in mathematical language. We are not your enemy. We have survived natural disasters, ice ages, and our own mistakes. We wish only to live. Why do you attack? The Vexor fleet paused. For the first time since their appearance, their assault slowed. A communication channel opened, crackling with electronic noise before a synthetic voice emerged. You are biological chaos. You adapt without control. You evolve without purpose. You are the species that consumed poison and grew stronger. You are the proof that organic life cannot be trusted to limit itself. Ambassador Morrison responded immediately. You're right. We did consume poison and grow stronger. Do you know why? Because we were dying, and we refused to accept that. We adapted because the alternative was extinction. But adaptation isn't chaos, it's survival. And survival doesn't require the death of others. Your Leviathan incident proves our point, the Vexor voice replied. Given any advantage, biological life weaponizes it. You turned a toxin into a tool of war. We turned a weapon into a defense, Catherine corrected. And then, when the war ended, we turned it into a foundation for peace. The Kralix are here, fighting alongside us. The species whose sacred creature we consumed is now our ally. We share the enhancement technology with anyone who wants it. We're making everyone stronger together because we learned that security doesn't come from being the only strong one. It comes from everyone being strong enough to not need conflict. There was a long pause. The Vexor fleet held position, their weapons powering down slightly but not deactivating. Finally, the voice returned. This is unexpected. Our models predicted that enhanced biological species would immediately seek to dominate others with their advantage. Your models are based on fear, not data, Dr. Park interjected, broadcasting from her lab. Yes, humans ate the Leviathan and got stronger. Do you know what we did next? We opened a restaurant. We invited our former enemies to dinner. We shared recipes. We're working with Kralix scientists to help them understand their own sacred creatures better. This is what biological life does. We adapt, yes, but we also cooperate, share, and build together. Tommy Chen's voice joined the channel, carrying the casual confidence of someone who had literally eaten death and lived to talk about it. Look, I'm the guy who started all this by eating a monster that killed my friends. I'm not a diplomat or a scientist. I'm just a soldier who got hungry. But here's what I learned. The scariest thing about biological life isn't that we adapt. It's that we adapt together. Every species in this fleet has something the others don't. We've all got different strengths. And when we combine them, we're not just stronger, we're better. That's what you're missing by being mostly machine. Not the chaos, but the cooperation that emerges from diversity. The Vexor fleet remained motionless for what felt like hours, but was actually only minutes. Then slowly, systematically, they began withdrawing their harvester drones. The synthetic voice returned, carrying what might have been confusion or possibly wonder. We will consider this data. The biological cooperation you described does not match our projections. We require time to process these anomalies and adjust our understanding. This council fleet will not be attacked. We will withdraw to observe. But know this, we will be watching. If biological life proves as dangerous as we calculated, we will return. Fair enough. Admiral Zhao replied. But while you're watching, observe how we build instead of destroy, cooperate instead of conquer, and turn every challenge into an opportunity for growth. Watch how the species that ate poison and got stronger chooses to use that strength. I think you'll find we're more interesting as partners than as enemies. The Vexor fleet jumped to FTL, leaving the Council forces in shocked silence. They had won, but not through superior firepower. They had won by being so fundamentally different from the Vexor's predictions that they had forced a pause, a recalculation, a chance for understanding to emerge. In the aftermath, as the Council fleet celebrated their bloodless victory, Captain Santos stood with Admiral Zhao, looking at the stars. Do you think they'll come back? Probably, Zhao admitted. But when they do, they'll be coming to learn, not to fight. We showed them something they couldn't compute. That being strong doesn't mean being alone, that adapting doesn't mean dominating, and that the species crazy enough to eat their enemies might also be wise enough to make friends with them instead. Maria laughed. Who would have thought? The war ended because a human ate what killed their soldiers, and now we're preventing wars by teaching other species about restaurants and cooperation. That's humanity for you, Zhao said. We'll eat absolutely anything, fight when we have to, but given the choice, we'd rather make friends and share a meal, even if that meal used to be our worst enemy, especially if it used to be our worst enemy. Back on Targon III, Tommy Chen reopened the Leviathan Grill after the brief closure during the Vexor crisis. Within days, the first Vexor observers arrived, their mechanical bodies awkward in the organic-focused environment. Tommy greeted them with the same warmth he showed everyone, offered them data samples instead of food since they couldn't eat, and began teaching them about the strange, beautiful chaos of biological cooperation over shared meals. The galaxy had learned its lesson about humanity. They were survivors, adapters, and impossibly stubborn optimists who believed that any problem could be solved with enough creativity, determination, and occasionally the willingness to eat things that would horrify sensible species. They were dangerous when threatened, but given the choice, they'd rather build restaurants than fortresses, create alliances than enemies, and turn yesterday's nightmares into today's opportunities. And somewhere in the cosmos, other species that humanity hadn't met yet were about to learn the most important lesson of all. Humans were the species that looked at poison and saw potential, at enemies and saw future friends, and at the impossible and said, "Hold my beer, I've got an idea." The galaxy would never be the same, and honestly, it was probably better that way.